Emily Lawson stepped onto the sun-baked tarmac of Fort Bliss, her boots sinking slightly into the fine sand, each step deliberate, measured. The early morning air carried the scent of diesel, ozone from nearby tanks, and the faint tang of sweat from soldiers already on the training field. Her Barrett .50 rifle, meticulously cleaned and polished, rested comfortably against her shoulder. She adjusted the strap, the weight of familiar reassurance, the smooth barrel gleaming under the rising sun. Around her, the sprawling base hummed with military life. Armored vehicles rumbled past, helicopters rotated their blades lazily, and groups of soldiers moved with precision drills. This was home, but it was also a proving ground. Even among elite soldiers, Emily stood out. Not because she sought attention, she never had, but because she had earned something most didn't. A reputation, quietly built, for long-range marksmanship that approached the impossible. Whispers trailed her across the field. Some were admiring, some skeptical. Few women had achieved her status, and fewer still had managed to survive the rigorous sniper training without bending under pressure. Emily didn't let the whispers reach her ears. They were background noise compared to the rhythm of her own breathing, the weight of her rifle, and the precise calculations that occupied her mind even while walking. Today, the tension on the base was palpable. Rumor had spread that a three-star general would inspect the sniper unit. General Marcus Holloway was known for his traditionalist views, a man who valued uniformity, discipline, and history over innovation or unconventional skill. Emily had faced skepticism from her peers, but the idea of impressing Holloway, that was a challenge in an entirely different league. She had heard stories of soldiers who faltered under his scrutiny, whose accomplishments were dismissed because they did not conform to his expectations. Yet Emily remained calm, her mind organizing every detail of the upcoming exercises, every shot she might need to take, every movement that could betray hesitation. As she walked, Emily's eyes scanned the terrain. The training range stretched out before her, a vast expanse of sand, scrub, and distant rocky ridges. Targets of various sizes were arrayed at measured distances, some relatively close, some at the outer limits of standard sniper practice, and a few beyond what was considered achievable for most soldiers. She had faced these distances countless times, but today's challenge carried more weight. It was not just about hitting targets. It was about proving that skill could transcend tradition, that precision could demand respect even from someone as formidable as General Holloway. Emily's thoughts drifted momentarily to the long hours that had brought her here. Days spent in near silence, calculating wind drift, temperature variations, and elevation changes. Nights spent staring at distant hills, adjusting scopes and running simulations in her mind. Each shot had been a lesson in patience, humility, and focus. She remembered one particularly grueling morning when her team leader had watched her struggle to hit a target at 2,800 meters. Time and again she had missed, frustration mounting, sun burning her neck until finally, a perfect shot rang out, ringing true across the valley. That memory was more than accomplishment. It was proof that persistence and attention to detail could achieve what seemed impossible. The base itself was alive with anticipation. Soldiers moved about in groups, some practicing drills, others tending to equipment. Helicopters spun overhead, sending waves of wind across the range. Even the animals seemed aware of the tension. Military working dogs patrolled with ears perked, eyes scanning, reflecting the heightened alertness of everyone nearby. Emily passed by several peers who nodded respectfully, some offering quiet encouragement. She returned a slight nod but kept her focus forward. Today, she wasn't seeking camaraderie or affirmation. Today was about skill, precision, and the silent acknowledgement that came from results, not words. The sound of approaching footsteps drew her attention. General Holloway had arrived, his presence immediately commanding. Soldiers snapped to attention, the rhythm of their movements precise and exacting. Holloway's reputation preceded him, sharp-eyed, discerning, and notoriously unforgiving. He walked with a steady, deliberate gait, scanning each soldier, each piece of equipment as though every detail mattered, and to him it did. Emily noticed his eyes briefly flick over her, registering her rifle but not yet lingering on her presence. A flicker of amusement, or perhaps skepticism, passed across his face. She ignored it, crouching instinctively to inspect her weapon, checking the scope, adjusting the bipod. Her hands moved with habitual efficiency, every motion reflecting years of rigorous training. Whispers among the nearby soldiers hinted at bets and quiet debates. Some were convinced she would falter under the general's scrutiny. Others, those who had witnessed her abilities firsthand, were confident that Emily could achieve the impossible and force recognition from even someone as rigid as Holloway. Emily didn't participate in the conversation. Her mind was already running through scenarios: wind drift over extreme distances, bullet trajectory, possible interference from heat haze, and the calculation of every element that could affect a long-range shot. It was a mental puzzle, intricate and exacting, but familiar and comforting to her. As she reached her designated position on the range, Emily knelt, placing the rifle gently on the sand. She surveyed the field, noting the distances, the placement of obstacles, and the potential points of deviation. Her breath slowed. Every movement, every glance was deliberate. The general's inspection continued, his footsteps echoing faintly in the quiet morning. Soldiers attempted brief exercises around her, but she remained focused, a still center amid controlled chaos. The tension was palpable, thick enough to taste. She could feel her pulse steadying, her body aligning with years of discipline. This was the moment she had prepared for. Not for recognition, not for accolades, but to prove, to herself and silently to the world, that expertise, precision, and relentless dedication could demand respect even in the face of doubt. The weight of her Barrett .50 was no longer a burden but an extension of herself, calibrated to perfection. Every calculation, every missed shot, every victory of the past had led to this point. Emily Lawson, poised and ready, awaited the challenge that would define her reputation, aware that today she would either force the general to pause or blend into the shadows of expectation, unnoticed but unbroken. The general's boots crunched on the gravel path as he moved past the assembled snipers, his eyes cold and critical. Soldiers straightened, posture rigid, rifles glinting under the sun. Emily felt the weight of his gaze brush over her, dismissive at first, as though she were invisible. She held her position, kneeling beside her Barrett .50, checking her scope again, her fingers steady and precise. Whispers among nearby soldiers carried speculation. Some doubted she could even impress him. Others, those who had witnessed her extraordinary skill, whispered in awe. She ignored it all. Her focus was on the task, not perception. Her mind drifted briefly to the early days of sniper training. She had been a rookie, green, underestimated, and relentlessly tested. She remembered struggling to hit targets at 1,000 meters, let alone 2,000. Her instructors, all veterans of deployments abroad, had not spared her criticism. "Snipers are built from patience and precision," they had said, and Emily had taken it to heart, refusing to let frustration dictate failure. She spent hours alone on the ranges, adjusting her scope, calculating wind drift, and experimenting with angles. Mistakes became lessons, and lessons became mastery. By the time she had completed the elite sniper program, Emily had earned something few ever did: respect through undeniable skill, not through rank or lineage. Yet today, facing General Marcus Holloway, even her confidence wavered slightly. His reputation was formidable. He was known for questioning the competence of even the most decorated soldiers, often underestimating unconventional methods or individualistic approaches. Rumors followed him, stories of soldiers who had their accomplishments dismissed for minor deviations from traditional procedure. Emily's unconventional techniques, her precise long-range shots beyond the expected limits, could either earn admiration or be written off as reckless. The uncertainty was a quiet tension, heavier than any rifle, heavier even than the 14.5 kilograms of her Barrett .50. Around her, other soldiers attempted their drills. Corporal Jackson, a seasoned sniper with years of experience, lined up a shot at 1,500 meters. He was methodical, precise, yet even his round veered slightly, missing the target. Soldiers murmured in disappointment. The general's brow furrowed. Emily watched without distraction. She adjusted the bipod on her rifle, checking the barrel alignment, humidity levels, wind direction, and elevation in a seamless mental calculation. Every detail mattered. Her pulse slowed and a strange calm settled over her. Years of preparation condensed into this moment. Focus was not optional, it was survival. The whispers grew louder. "She's fastidious, but will she actually hit it?" one private muttered. Another added, "That's 3,200 meters. Nobody touches that during training." Emily ignored them. The mental calculations of ballistics, wind, and terrain were already occupying her mind, leaving no room for distraction. She remembered the moment she had first achieved her 3,200-meter target during exercises. The dust trail rising faintly from impact, her fellow soldiers staring in disbelief, and the commanding officer giving a nod rarely given to anyone. That memory fueled her resolve. Recognition might not come today, but precision would speak regardless. The general paused briefly, his sharp eyes scanning the group. Emily felt the tension like static in the air. Soldiers moved almost robotically, aware that every gesture and adjustment was under scrutiny. Corporal Jackson prepared a second shot at a different target but missed again, frustration etched across his face. Murmurs ran through the ranks. Emily stayed still, breathing in sync with her internal rhythm, counting seconds in measured silence. Every detail mattered. The barrel's temperature, the bullet's trajectory, and the invisible forces that could shift a shot by centimeters, or feet, over extreme distance. Her opportunity arrived. She adjusted her scope, aligning perfectly with the furthest target, a faint black silhouette placed at what felt like the edge of the horizon. Emily's hands were steady, her mind precise. She could feel the presence of the general, almost tangible behind her, yet she did not allow it to disturb her focus. This was the moment when skill mattered more than hierarchy. Years of discipline, calculation, and patience had led to this single, crucial moment. The general might doubt her now, but the rifle in her hands could silence skepticism faster than words ever could. The air shifted slightly, a gust of wind brushing across the range. Emily adjusted her aim fractionally, calculating drift with precision that came from repetition and instinct honed over countless hours. Other soldiers watched from the sidelines, some incredulous, some doubtful as she checked her scope, measuring angles and distances in her mind with near mathematical accuracy. "She's going to do it," whispered a sergeant, shaking his head. The atmosphere tightened. Even the general, previously detached, seemed momentarily arrested by the meticulous preparation unfolding before him. Emily's mind replayed every calculation. Years of practice, every missed shot, every correction she had made, all of it led here. She took a deep breath, aligning her stance and ensuring the rifle rested perfectly on the sand. Her finger hovered near the trigger, ready but patient. Time slowed, the world around her receding to a distant hum. Dust swirled in the early morning light, but she was centered, calm, focused. Every possibility, every variable, every wind current and subtle environmental change had been accounted for. She was ready. The general stepped closer, inspecting the setup. He frowned, skeptical yet intrigued. Emily didn't flinch. The rifle was an extension of herself, and the target, impossible though it seemed, was already within reach in her mind. The whispers faded, anticipation hung heavy in the air. Soldiers froze, watching as she settled into the shot, every movement precise and deliberate. Emily took one final breath, exhaled slowly, and prepared to prove what skill, patience, and perseverance could achieve. Today, the impossible would be tested, and the world, or at least the general, would witness precision that demanded acknowledgement. Emily Lawson knelt behind her Barrett .50, the massive rifle a familiar weight in her hands, steady and unyielding. The farthest target of the exercise loomed in the distance, a faint silhouette at what seemed an impossible 3,200 meters. Soldiers whispered among themselves, some incredulous, others anxious. Corporal Jackson, still frustrated from previous misses, muttered under his breath, adjusting his scope again. Emily blocked it out. This wasn't about proving him right or wrong. It wasn't about recognition yet. It was about precision, focus, and survival in the controlled chaos of the range. She adjusted her scope, calibrating for the variables that would determine success or failure. Wind speed, direction, temperature, humidity, even the faint shimmer of heat rising from the desert sand. Her mind ran through calculations she had memorized through countless hours of solitary training. Bullet drop over extreme distances, Coriolis effect, minute shifts in pressure. Every factor mattered. Her heartbeat slowed, her breathing synchronized with her internal rhythm. Patience had always been her ally, panic her enemy. She knew the moment required calm, unwavering concentration, and trust in her training. The other snipers took their shots first. Corporal Jackson attempted a second round, miscalculating the wind drift again, the bullet veering wide. A wave of disappointment rippled through the unit. The general's expression remained unreadable, though his brow furrowed slightly. Emily noted it but did not let it distract her. Every failure around her was a lesson, a reminder of what it meant to reach beyond the ordinary. She had faced these distances before, and she had succeeded where others failed. Today would be no different. Emily steadied the rifle on its bipod, the barrel glinting in the morning sun. She visualized the bullet's flight path in her mind, imagining it arcing across the miles, adjusting for every variable. Her hands moved with practiced precision, fine-tuning the scope, aligning her position. She inhaled slowly, exhaled, and recalculated. Time seemed to stretch, each second magnified as she prepared for a shot that would define the perception of her abilities. Around her, the desert was silent except for the faint hum of the bass, a stillness that amplified the tension. The general stepped closer, his boots crunching on gravel. Emily felt his presence, sharp and critical, a weight heavier than her rifle. She did not look at him, her eyes were locked on the distant target. The soldiers on the sidelines held their breath, sensing the magnitude of the moment. The whispers had stopped. Anticipation was palpable. Emily's mind recited calculations silently. The trajectory, the wind drift, the distance correction, the minute variances that could spell failure. Each detail had been practiced, refined, and mastered. She trusted her preparation implicitly. A faint gust of wind rippled across the range. Emily adjusted for it, factoring the minor shift into her mental equation. Every instinct, every ounce of knowledge was aligned. Her finger hovered near the trigger. She had faced doubt, skepticism, and failure countless times, yet this moment was different. This was not practice. This was a demonstration, a test of whether her mastery could force acknowledgement from one of the most demanding officers she would ever encounter. Her pulse was steady. Her mind clear, her mission singular. Corporal Jackson tried again, missing the target by several feet. The murmurs of disappointment were audible, but Emily remained unmoved. She slowly exhaled, the air dry and warm against her skin. She checked the alignment one last time, the scope centered precisely. The weight of her Barrett .50 was familiar, reassuring, an extension of her own body. Years of training had honed her muscle memory and mental acuity. She adjusted her cheek against the stock, her eye lining perfectly with the scope, visualizing the target and the path the round would take. The desert seemed to hold its breath. Dust swirled lazily, heat shimmered faintly on the horizon, and the wind shifted imperceptibly. Emily adjusted again, microcorrections that only an experienced sniper could calculate instinctively. Soldiers around her leaned forward, some silently praying, some watching with awe, all captivated. The general's eyes narrowed, scrutinizing her technique, his skepticism mingled with curiosity. Emily's body and mind moved in unison, a seamless rhythm of training and instinct, the culmination of countless hours of preparation. She breathed in, slow and controlled, aligning every detail. The moment was tense, stretching into eternity in her perception. Her finger finally squeezed the trigger. The rifle's recoil was firm but manageable. Emily's body absorbed it perfectly. Time seemed to suspend as the bullet traced its invisible arc across the desert. She visualized the path precisely, trusting every calculation, every adjustment. Around her, the base seemed to fade, leaving only the rifle, the target, and the silent tension of anticipation. The shot landed perfectly. Dust puffed from the target at 3,200 meters, a perfect strike. Gasps rose among soldiers, some fell silent in disbelief. The general froze mid-step, his critical gaze now mixed with shock and recognition. Emily remained kneeling, calm, steady, not celebrating, letting her achievement speak louder than words ever could. The impossible had been achieved. The target, considered beyond the reach of most snipers, now bore proof of her precision. Every calculation, every hour of practice, every moment of discipline had culminated in that single, decisive moment. The soldiers around her erupted quietly, murmurs of awe spreading like wildfire. Emily packed up methodically, not allowing herself to react outwardly. Her focus remained sharp. Humility was her shield. She had done what others had only dreamed of. Her mastery over distance, wind, and the unpredictable forces of nature had forced recognition from the most skeptical of observers. Even the general's expression had changed subtly, his eyes lingering on her sniper badge, the emblem of achievement few ever earned. Emily Lawson had proven her worth without a word, and the echoes of that shot would linger far beyond the range. The desert rang with a quiet awe, broken only by the faint settling of dust around the target. Emily Lawson remained kneeling behind her Barrett .50, calm and collected, as though nothing extraordinary had just occurred. Yet everything had. Soldiers froze, eyes wide, whispers dying on their lips. The impossible had been achieved, a perfect shot at 3,200 meters, a feat so rare that even the most veteran snipers struggled to imagine it. Emily exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from her body. Every muscle that had held rigid focus relaxed incrementally. Her work was precise, deliberate, and unflinchingly disciplined. The general, Marcus Halloway, stopped in his tracks. His boots kicked up small clouds of dust as he lingered, eyes narrowing as he scanned the rifle, the range, and then the subtle gleam of Emily's 3,200-meter sniper badge. He had walked past her with skepticism moments ago, confident she would falter. Now, that confidence was being challenged in the most undeniable way. His expression was a mixture of disbelief and respect, though he kept it carefully controlled, like a strategist hiding his emotions behind a mask. This was not recognition he handed out lightly. Around the range, Emily's peers were stunned into silence. Corporal Jackson's jaw hung slightly open. Private Mendez whispered something that no one could hear, disbelief etched in every gesture. Soldiers had watched others miss at distances half of what Emily had just conquered. They had seen the general's critical gaze pass over others without pause. And now, this. Emily had not only hit the target but had done so with the composure and precision that made the impossible look effortless. Her presence, once quietly respected, now demanded attention, though she had no intention of claiming it. Emily packed her rifle methodically, every motion exact, careful to maintain order and control. The recoil from the shot had settled perfectly in her shoulders, the bipod still steady on the sand. Her fingers moved over the weapon with familiarity born of countless hours of practice. She did not glance at the general, though she could feel his gaze, heavy and inspecting, as if attempting to measure her competence in silence. Emily had learned long ago that skill spoke louder than words, and results could force even the most skeptical observer to pause. Today was proof of that principle. The general finally spoke, his voice deliberate, carrying authority that echoed faintly across the desert. "Explain your technique," he commanded, approaching with measured steps. His eyes scrutinized her stance, her alignment, and the meticulously arranged rifle setup. Emily remained calm, breathing slowly, calculating her response as carefully as she had calculated the shot. "Adjusting for wind, temperature, humidity, and the Coriolis effect, sir," she began. Her voice was steady, precise, reflecting not arrogance but confidence rooted in mastery. The trajectory was calculated in advance, with incremental corrections applied during the shot for micro changes in air pressure. The general listened, nodding almost imperceptibly. He examined the sniper badge gleaming on her uniform, a symbol of achievement few ever earned. Few soldiers reach this range with consistent accuracy, he said quietly. Emily packed her rifle into its case with calm deliberation, not allowing herself to react outwardly to the acknowledgement. Her peers watched, some shaking their heads in awe, others leaning closer to absorb the lesson in humility and skill. The general's approval was subtle but unequivocal. Emily had earned it, not through pleading or persuasion, but by demonstrating undeniable precision. As Emily rose to her feet, the weight of attention shifted subtly toward her. Soldiers she had trained with now regarded her with a new lens, respect tempered by admiration. The desert wind lifted faint clouds of dust, and Emily's hair fluttered across her eyes, but she did not adjust it. Her focus remained inward, anchored in years of preparation. The general took a step closer, inspecting her rifle again, and finally a slow nod. A gesture so simple, yet it carried enormous weight. Recognition had arrived, delivered quietly but firmly, as deserved by someone who had proven mastery through action, not words. Emily's mind reflected briefly on the journey that had led here. She remembered nights spent alone on distant ranges, adjusting for minute details while the world slept. Every missed shot, every correction, every failure had been a step toward this precision. The rifle was an extension of her body, her mind, and her patience. Today, she had executed every calculation flawlessly, demonstrating that skill could transcend expectations, that the results of mastery could demand acknowledgement even from the most critical observers. She realized, in a quiet way, that this was only the beginning. Around her, soldiers began to murmur in admiration. Private Mendez approached cautiously, his voice low. "Captain Lawson, that was incredible." Emily nodded briefly, acknowledging the comment without fanfare. Her eyes scanned the range, noting subtle movements, evaluating the terrain, and already considering variables for future exercises. She had learned that excellence required continuous vigilance. The general's presence lingered like a shadow over the range, but Emily's focus was unwavering. Results, not attention, were the true measure of a sniper. The general finally spoke again, his tone carrying a hint of rare respect. Few soldiers achieve this level of proficiency. Your work is precise, deliberate, and effective. Well done, Captain. Emily acknowledged with a subtle nod, maintaining her composure. She had learned the value of humility alongside skill. Recognition was not for boasting, but for acknowledgement of mastery. Soldiers who had doubted her now looked on with renewed respect. In that quiet desert moment, Emily understood that excellence had its own voice, silent, commanding, and unmistakable. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the range. Emily packed the remaining gear carefully, methodically, her mind already shifting toward the next steps. Today, the impossible had been proven possible. The general's respect was granted, subtle yet definitive, and her peers had witnessed it firsthand. Emily walked away from the firing line, the weight of her rifle lighter now than the burden of expectation she had carried alone for so long. Precision, patience, and relentless focus had earned her acknowledgement, and the echoes of that perfect shot would ripple across the base for weeks to come. The desert heat settled over the base, baking the sand into a thin layer of shimmering dust. Soldiers lingered, some hesitant to approach, others awestruck. Emily Lawson remained composed, packing her Barrett .50 methodically, her fingers moving over each component with precise care. Every motion was deliberate, betraying nothing of the triumph she had just achieved. Her 3,200-meter shot was more than a demonstration. It was proof that skill, preparation, and patience could defy skepticism and command respect. The general, Marcus Holloway, stood nearby, observing silently, his presence both imposing and measured, a living reminder that recognition was earned, not given. Holloway approached her, steps deliberate, boots kicking small clouds of sand into the desert air. His face was unreadable, the practiced mask of a soldier and strategist, yet his eyes betrayed curiosity and a hint of surprise. "Explain your methodology," he commanded, his voice low but carrying across the range. Emily lifted her gaze, steady and calm, and outlined every aspect of her calculation: trajectory adjustments, wind drift, temperature and humidity effects, and the minute corrections applied during her shot. Her voice was even, precise, lacking any hint of arrogance. She was confident, but her confidence was rooted in preparation, not bravado. The general nodded slowly, stepping closer to examine her rifle and her stance. His eyes lingered on the sniper badge glinting on her chest, a symbol of rare skill and accomplishment. Few had earned the 3,200-meter badge. Fewer still had demonstrated it in front of a skeptical audience. Emily remained kneeling, calm, letting her words, actions, and presence speak louder than emotion. Around them, soldiers watched in quiet awe. Private Mendez, Corporal Jackson, and others who had doubted her earlier now looked on, a mixture of admiration and sheepish realization on their faces. She had commanded respect without raising her voice. The general's voice broke the silence again. "Few soldiers reach this level of precision consistently," he said, his tone deliberate. "Your performance demonstrates discipline, patience, and mastery. Well done, Captain Lawson." Emily acknowledged the praise with a subtle nod, maintaining her composure. Recognition had arrived, not through spectacle or fanfare, but through undeniable results. She had learned long ago that accolades meant little without substance. The respect of peers and superiors was earned by action, precision, and reliability. Her shot, now cemented in the memory of everyone present, had spoken volumes. Soldiers around her began to murmur, some stepping closer to offer congratulations. "Captain Lawson, that was incredible," said Private Mendez, eyes wide. Corporal Jackson, usually confident and outspoken, approached with a quiet nod, muttering, "I should have paid closer attention." Emily smiled faintly but remained calm, acknowledging them with a nod. She had never sought validation. It was recognition, unasked for, that carried weight. Her peers now observed her not only as a skilled sniper, but as a standard of excellence, someone whose precision and discipline set the benchmark for what was possible. Emily's mind reflected briefly on the journey that had brought her here. Early mornings at distant ranges, solitary hours adjusting calculations and scope settings, countless missed shots, all had led to this moment. Every failure had been a lesson, every correction a step toward mastery. The general's acknowledgement was important, but it was the silent validation of skill, the knowledge that she had earned her place through relentless discipline, that resonated most deeply. Achievement, she knew, was not measured by accolades alone, but by the ability to perform under pressure, consistently and flawlessly. The general gestured toward her rifle. "Your work here is exceptional. I would like you to brief me privately on your approach to extreme-range sniping," he said. Emily understood the weight of the request. It was more than a courtesy. It was an opportunity to influence the practices of the elite unit itself. She nodded, collecting her gear methodically. Around the range, soldiers began to realign themselves, some casting furtive glances toward her as if reassessing what they thought they knew. Emily had shifted perception not by words but through action. Her presence, quiet and disciplined, had commanded attention. As she followed the general to a quieter area of the base for the briefing, Emily reflected on the delicate balance of humility and confidence. Recognition had been granted, yet she felt no need to revel in it. Her focus remained on the craft, on the pursuit of mastery, and on the responsibility that came with skill. The general's respect was acknowledgement, but her true satisfaction came from knowing she had executed flawlessly, maintained composure, and demonstrated that excellence was not bound by expectation or bias. She was recognized, yes, but her journey was far from complete. Soldiers lingered behind, whispering and sharing stories of what they had witnessed. Emily's name began to circulate across the base, not as gossip, but as a quiet legend. The sniper who had accomplished what most considered impossible, who had faced skepticism and emerged not just victorious but commanding respect. Her peers had seen precision, patience, and calm under scrutiny. Her superiors had witnessed mastery that demanded acknowledgement. And Emily, standing poised and steady, realized that recognition was not a destination, but a milestone along a lifelong path of discipline, focus, and continuous improvement. By mid-morning, the sun had risen fully, casting the range in sharp, bright light. Emily returned to her position, rifle cleaned and stored, badge polished and gleaming. Soldiers moved around her, their exercises continuing, yet the atmosphere was subtly different, more respectful, more attentive. The general, observing quietly from a distance, had altered his perception. Emily's performance had transcended expectation, proving that excellence could command attention silently, without fanfare. In the stillness that followed, Emily understood that recognition, while satisfying, was secondary to mastery itself. It was skill that endured. Acknowledgement was merely its reflection. The heat of the midday sun settled over Fort Bliss as Emily Lawson walked from the firing line, her Barrett .50 secured carefully in its case. The 3,200-meter shot was no longer just a demonstration. It had become legend among her peers. Soldiers who had doubted her now regarded her with quiet respect, some approaching cautiously, others lingering just to watch her movements, absorbing her discipline, composure, and methodical efficiency. Emily nodded politely, acknowledging greetings without pause, her mind already shifting toward the next challenge. Recognition was welcome, but her focus remained on mastery, not accolades. The general, Marcus Halloway, had requested a private briefing, a rare honor and an unusual indication of approval. Emily followed him through the base, noting how other soldiers subtly cleared their paths, respect tempered with curiosity in their glances. Her mind rehearsed her explanations, anticipating every question he might ask about extreme-range sniping, equipment calibration, and training methodology. Every minute detail mattered. This briefing was not a formality. It was an opportunity to influence the practices of elite marksmen and shape the unit's future. Emily understood the weight of the moment and moved with quiet purpose. Inside a small tactical planning room, the general gestured for her to sit. The walls were lined with maps of terrain, bullet trajectories, and mission scenarios. Halloway studied the data, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "Captain Lawson, your performance on the range was exceptional," he began. "Few soldiers could execute such a shot, and fewer with such composure. I want to know how you approach extreme-range engagement. Your methods will be used to train others in the unit." Emily nodded, ready to explain her process in detail, from environmental calculations to mental conditioning, ensuring each explanation was precise, actionable, and practical. She began outlining her methodology, breaking down each factor: the calculation of wind speed over extreme distances, adjustments for heat shimmer, humidity, and even the subtle influence of the Coriolis effect. She demonstrated how to align a rifle mechanically, how to adjust body posture for minimal movement, and how to maintain mental focus over extended periods. Halloway listened intently, occasionally interrupting to clarify a technical point, yet never questioning her competence. Emily's explanations were detailed but concise, balancing depth with clarity, reflecting years of experience and tireless practice. Outside the room, whispers spread among soldiers. News of the private briefing circulated quickly. The general had requested Emily's guidance. Those who had once doubted her now approached her with curiosity and respect, eager to learn from someone whose skill was undeniable. Private Mendez shadowed her quietly, asking questions about calculations and scope settings. Corporal Jackson lingered nearby, acknowledging silently that Emily's precision had set a new standard. Emily answered with patience, aware that her role was no longer just executing shots, but shaping the next generation of snipers. Leadership was now part of her responsibility. The day passed in a haze of tactical discussions and training adjustments. Emily demonstrated techniques, corrected mistakes, and emphasized discipline. Her peers watched, absorbing every detail, internalizing methods that had once seemed unattainable. The general observed intermittently, nodding at correct adjustments, subtly guiding procedures without undermining her authority. Emily recognized that influence carried weight far beyond the battlefield. It shaped morale, confidence, and the culture of excellence. Her quiet authority was now undeniable, born not of rank alone but of skill, mastery, and unwavering composure. By late afternoon, the sun had lowered in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert range. Emily returned to the firing line briefly, observing the soldiers' exercises. The range that had once been a proving ground for her skill now also served as a classroom. She noted subtle improvements in posture, adjustments in calculation, and the emerging confidence of those who had struggled under her gaze. Recognition, once a fleeting acknowledgement, had become an ongoing responsibility. To teach, to mentor, and to ensure that precision, patience, and discipline became standards rather than exceptions. The general approached her as she packed up the range. "Captain Lawson, your work today will be remembered," he said. "Not just for the shot, but for how you command attention and elevate those around you. I want you to continue mentoring and testing new recruits in extreme-range operations. You have the potential to influence this unit for years to come." Emily acknowledged with a subtle nod, understanding the weight of his words. This was not just recognition. It was trust, responsibility, and an invitation to shape the future of elite snipers in the U.S. Army. As she walked back toward the barracks, Emily reflected on the day. The 3,200-meter shot had earned respect, yes, but it had also created expectations. Excellence was a continuous process, not a single achievement. She knew that leadership demanded patience, teaching, and the ability to inspire others to reach beyond what they thought possible. Soldiers who had doubted her now had a model of discipline and precision. The general's trust and her peers' admiration reinforced a lesson she had learned long ago. Skill and composure commanded recognition more effectively than words ever could. By evening, Emily stood at the edge of the range, watching the sun dip below distant ridges. Dust swirled in the warm desert breeze and the base was quieting as soldiers returned to their routines. She felt a deep satisfaction, tempered by awareness that mastery was a journey, not a destination. Recognition was fleeting, skill endured. Her peers were beginning to understand that, and she had a responsibility to guide them. Emily's legacy, quiet and deliberate, was beginning to take shape. Today, her skill had been acknowledged. Tomorrow, it would be passed on. Days passed since the 3,200-meter demonstration, yet the echoes of Emily Lawson's feet lingered across Fort Bliss. Soldiers who once whispered doubts now paused respectfully as she passed. The weight of her accomplishment had shifted something intangible in the unit. Discipline, precision, and quiet authority now carried her name. Emily moved through the base with purpose, her Barrett .50 resting in its case, ready yet symbolic, a reminder of the skill that had earned her this new status. General Marcus Holloway had called her in for another briefing. This time, the stakes were higher. A new assignment had been approved. Emily was to join an elite sniper program responsible for testing extreme-range rifles and training the most promising recruits in specialized missions. This was no ordinary posting. It demanded technical mastery, leadership, and unwavering focus. She arrived at the planning room, maps and range charts spread across the table, Holloway waiting, expression unreadable yet tinged with subtle approval. "Captain Lawson," he began, voice precise, carrying authority and expectation, "your performance exceeded every metric we track. This assignment is not just an opportunity, it is a responsibility. You will train others, test new rifles, and develop strategies that push the limits of precision engagement. Success here influences the entire unit." Emily nodded, recognizing the gravity of the mission. This was beyond demonstration. It was about shaping the future of elite snipers. Her mind flickered briefly to her previous experiences, calculating distances, wind, and environmental variables, knowing that these lessons would now be applied in broader contexts. Emily's first task was to evaluate extreme-range rifles that had been modified for specialized missions. Each weapon had minor variances, from barrel length to custom optics, and she had to determine which would perform reliably under extreme distances and unpredictable conditions. She meticulously examined each rifle, measuring weight, recoil, and accuracy, comparing them against known benchmarks. Her peers observed silently, noting the speed, efficiency, and depth of her evaluation. Emily's mastery was no longer theoretical. It was practical, influential, and directly shaping operational standards. Simultaneously, Emily began mentoring the next generation of snipers. She instructed recruits on micro-adjustments in the field, teaching how to calculate bullet drop, wind drift, and environmental variables that could make or break a mission. Some struggled at first, their techniques clumsy, their calculations off by centimeters or meters that would be critical at 1,500 or 2,000 meters. Emily approached them patiently, demonstrating precision in action, explaining reasoning and guiding corrections. Her presence commanded respect, her methods refined but adaptable, allowing each recruit to absorb lessons without intimidation. By midweek, Emily had established herself as both instructor and evaluator. Soldiers listened attentively to her explanations of trajectory physics, reading mirages, and assessing environmental influences. She encouraged experimentation within strict parameters, allowing recruits to experience success and failure safely. Holloway observed from a distance, occasionally stepping in to pose challenging questions or evaluate methods. Emily responded with calm confidence, providing clear, actionable insights, bridging the gap between theoretical expertise and field application. Her reputation as a master sniper and patient mentor grew with each passing hour. Amid the training, Emily also led field exercises designed to simulate real-world operations. Soldiers moved in formations, calculated distances under pressure, and applied her methods to moving targets. Emily oversaw every detail, noting not only technical execution but psychological composure. Extreme-range sniping was not just about accuracy, it was about mental discipline. She drilled recruits on patience, breath control, and focus, demonstrating that a single miscalculation could have consequences in high-stakes situations. Her leadership style was subtle but effective, blending encouragement with quiet authority. By the end of the week, the unit had noticeably improved. Missed shots diminished, calculation accuracy increased, and soldiers began to internalize Emily's methods. She noted their progress, making adjustments and encouraging refinement. Holloway, observing from a distance, nodded occasionally, his skepticism replaced by subtle approval. Emily recognized that leadership was an extension of her skills: influence, precision, and consistency. She had transformed from solitary expert to mentor, shaping the operational capacity of the entire unit. Her 3,200-meter demonstration had been the catalyst, but sustained impact required ongoing vigilance and skill. As evening fell, Emily stood at the edge of the range, observing the sun cast long shadows across the desert terrain. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders. She was no longer just a sniper. She was a leader, a teacher, and a standard-bearer for excellence. The wind shifted faintly, carrying dust across the range, and Emily adjusted her thoughts, as if aligning her focus to the subtle cues of the environment. Her journey had transformed. Recognition had evolved into leadership, and mastery had expanded into influence. General Holloway approached silently, his presence commanding yet measured. "Captain Lawson, your impact on this unit is already evident. Continue developing this program, and your methods will set a precedent for elite snipers across the service." Emily nodded, absorbing the weight of his words. The mission was no longer simply to prove herself, but to elevate those around her. Her focus, discipline, and precision would now define standards, ensuring that future snipers would operate at levels previously considered impossible. As night fell and the desert cooled, Emily packed up her equipment one final time, reflecting on the week's lessons. Her peers had learned, adapted, and begun to surpass expectations. The general had acknowledged her influence, subtly but definitively. And Emily, quiet and disciplined, understood that mastery was not a destination but a continuum. Each day offered new challenges, new calculations, and new opportunities to refine her craft. The sniper who had once faced skepticism now stood at the forefront of elite training, ready to push the boundaries of what was possible. The desert sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the training range at Fort Bliss. Emily Lawson stood quietly, her Barrett .50 resting nearby, its weight familiar yet almost ceremonial now. Years of rigorous training, countless hours of calculation, and the perfect 3,200-meter shot had brought her here, but it was not the single achievement that defined her. It was the influence she had cultivated, the standard she had set, and the legacy she was building for future snipers. Soldiers moved across the range, their focus precise, their execution refined, a living testament to her mentorship. Emily watched a young recruit kneel and adjust her scope, calculating wind drift and trajectory, her fingers moving with careful deliberation. The girl reminded Emily of herself years ago, determined, uncertain, and quietly ambitious. Emily approached, crouching beside her and offering subtle guidance. "Notice the mirage near the target," she said softly, pointing with a gloved finger. "Adjust your aim slightly to account for the heat distortion. Precision isn't just about hitting, it's about anticipating." The recruit nodded, eyes wide, absorbing the lesson not as instruction but as an insight into mastery itself. Nearby, General Marcus Halloway observed quietly, a rare expression of approval softening his usually stern demeanor. Soldiers glanced at him, understanding the significance. Emily's leadership had not only elevated the snipers but reshaped the culture of the unit. Her discipline, focus, and unwavering composure had become benchmarks, silently inspiring others to achieve levels previously considered unreachable. Recognition had come first, but respect and influence were enduring. Emily's impact was tangible, reflected in the improved skills, morale, and cohesion of her team. Even beyond Fort Bliss, word of Emily's expertise began to ripple through military channels. She was consulted on rifle modifications, sniper training protocols, and tactical planning for extreme-range operations. Her methods, once experimental, became standards. Emily understood that the sniper badge she wore, a symbol of a single, extraordinary shot, was less important than the cumulative effect of her mentorship, precision, and strategic insight. Her legacy was not measured in accolades alone, but in the capacity she had created within others. As evening settled over the desert, Emily reflected on the journey that had shaped her. She remembered her earliest days on the range, the skepticism of peers, and the quiet persistence that had allowed her to achieve what others deemed impossible. Each moment, each calculation, each painstaking hour of practice had culminated not only in personal achievement, but in the opportunity to inspire and elevate those around her. Recognition was fleeting, mastery and influence were lasting. Her journey was a lesson in patience, discipline, and the quiet power of excellence. A group of recruits gathered around, listening as Emily explained advanced techniques in trajectory prediction, environmental assessment, and mental conditioning. Her teaching style had evolved, precise, patient, and adaptable. She challenged them to think critically, to anticipate variables, and to embrace mistakes as opportunities for learning. Soldiers who had once doubted her skills now sought her guidance eagerly, understanding that mastery was not simply about hitting a target. It was about understanding the physics, psychology, and strategy behind every shot. Emily's influence was shaping a new generation of elite marksmen. The general approached her again as the last rays of sunlight fell behind distant ridges. "Captain Lawson," he said, voice steady, "you've transformed this unit. Your shot was remarkable, but your leadership and mentorship are extraordinary. You've ensured that the future of sniper operations will be stronger because of you." Emily nodded, absorbing the weight of his words without pride. She had never sought fame or accolades. Her satisfaction came from precision, from the growth of others, and from the knowledge that she had forged a standard that would endure. Later, alone at the edge of the range, Emily cleaned her Barrett .50, the familiar routine grounding her. She traced the contours of the rifle, the worn grips and polished barrel reflecting years of dedication. The 3,200-meter shot had been a defining moment, but her true legacy lay in the people she had trained, the protocols she had refined, and the culture of precision and discipline she had nurtured. Emily understood that mastery was a continuum. Every lesson she taught, every adjustment she made, and every calculation she demonstrated would ripple forward, shaping soldiers and missions for years to come. The desert cooled as stars began to emerge in the clear night sky. Emily sat quietly, the rifle resting beside her, reflecting on the journey from doubt to recognition, from individual skill to leadership. Soldiers were camped nearby, practicing quietly, their movements precise and deliberate. She knew that the foundation she had built would endure beyond her presence. Her lessons, her methodology, and her unwavering focus would continue to influence snipers she might never meet. That, she realized, was the true measure of her legacy. As the night deepened, Emily stood and took a final look across the range. The targets, the sand, the distant ridges, they were all part of a landscape where skill met opportunity, where patience and discipline were rewarded, and where excellence commanded respect. She had walked past doubt, faced skepticism, and earned recognition, but her greatest accomplishment was the quiet, enduring influence she had instilled in others. Emily Lawson, sniper and mentor, had transformed not just her own path but the trajectory of an entire unit. And as the stars glittered above, reflecting off her polished rifle, Emily smiled faintly. Precision was not a moment, it was a lifetime. Mastery was not an accolade, it was a responsibility, and she had embraced both fully, leaving a legacy that would resonate long after the desert wind had swept across Fort Bliss.